This video is not about running anywhere. It's not about anywhere in particular. It's about lessons I learned along life's journey. And I suppose the most important is to learn to say thank you. And that's typically what these videos are about. And years ago, when I was about leaving school age, my dad was working in Cameroon in West Africa. And he was in Douala, which is the capital, French-speaking capital. And there's an English-speaking part of Cameroon further inland, and we went there. Now, as a child, I had read the books of Gerald Durrell, loved them, My Family and Other Animals. Who doesn't like a lovely pun? Yeah, My Family and Other Animals. And he'd written a book, I think, called Baffet Beagles, and he'd been to that part of the world and was interested in zoology and ornithology and all those kinds of things. And we went up to, and now this would have been about the late 1970s, very late 1970s. And we went up, and we're now in the middle of West Africa, and it's a Sunday morning, and I'm wandering down a very rural part of Africa, dirt road, hard dirt road. And I'm wandering along, and I see two women coming towards me in very beautiful Sunday African dress, traditional dress on a Sunday. And they're out for a stroll, and I'm wandering along, and you stand out. You're the only white guy in the village, well, apart from my own man and whoever else was around further off. They were somewhere else. And you stand out, and the two women come along, and they say hello, and I said hello. And it was back in those days when it was cool and nice that people would ask you where you're from. Now everyone's afraid of whatever. Anyway, nobody asks anybody where they're from anymore. But I was asked where I was from. And I said, and I started thinking, because in those days, Ireland was a little known country. We didn't have the fame for actors and musicians and dare I say it, architects around the world that we do now. And a lot of times my personal experience was that people would think I was from England. They thought about England, and of course people had heard of sometimes if they had heard, they'd heard of some troubles in Northern Ireland, and there was all of that sort of stuff. And so when the two women asked me where I was from, I was preparing to explain all of this, and I was preparing to say I'm from Dublin, and then I was you'd have to explain where Dublin was. And so I said I'm from Dublin in Ireland, and they said, we've been to Limerick and Cork. I learned a great lesson that day. It was one of I still think of it. I still laugh thinking about how I learned something really valuable that day that I bring with me everywhere. I've never forgotten that. You just anyway. That was you can read into yourself what I learned, but it was fantastic. Yeah. And then not long afterwards, I was in second year of architecture school, and we were asked to design a canoe club. And back then, there were some buildings that were using GRP, glass reinforced polyester or plastic, as an exterior cladding. And I thought, that's what they make canoes out of. I'll do this. I thought it'd be really fun. So I'm making all these lovely bubbly shapes, and it's all bright colors, as is my want. It's all bright colors. And I'm there, and I'm drawing this. And then the tutor comes in. The tutor was Eamon O'Doherty, a very talented, very funny and very likable man in many ways, Eamon. And he designed, if you've been to Dublin, he designed the floozy and the jacuzzi. The Anna Livia Plurabella. I should have known this. It's the James Joyce. It was after James Joyce that this statue. It's no longer in the centre of Dublin. It's moved. But anyway, Eamon designed that. He also designed the Galway hooker, which is a type of ship, in case you're wondering. So he's very talented, Eamon. He comes in, and in those days, people come around to the tutors and talk to you about your work. So he comes around, and he's looking at my work. And it's all this GRP. And he says, GRP is for shite houses. Dunnies, if you're from Australia, Bartek. Wherever. Anyway, he said GRP is for shite houses. And I took, oh my God, Eamon has said GRP is for shite houses. So I changed the whole design of it to be from sort of cut stone and angular and everything that the earlier scheme wasn't. And the year ends, and those days we used to have you'd go into these to the end of year tutors, you'd go into a room, they'd open up your portfolio, and they told you whether you passed or you failed the year. It was very tense. And it was quite common for people to not pass the year. It was more common than not, at least in the span of your time in the university. And so I'm in there, and Bob Fowler and Mick Griffin are opening my portfolio, and they're fixated on a picture I had taken. So I thought, oh, things are going quite well, and then they come to my canoe club, my cut stone canoe club. Oh, it's horrible. And anyway, they said, well, what happened to the early, lovely, bubbly canoe club with all the vibrant shapes and the colours and the life and the energy? And Eamon came in, and Eamon said, GRP was for shite houses. And they said, sure, never mind, Eamon. He probably had a bad day. And I thought, so how can I spend my life, my career, my anything, based on the fact that the person judging you might have had a bad day? And Eamon might have had a bad day, and he's a supremely talented man. If you want to see his sketches, turn up in the James Joyce Tower in Dublin. They're amazing. And so, yeah, I decided after that I was going to have to be better at judging my own work, my own abilities, lack of abilities, lots of cases. But I would judge them, and that would be, and I can be a harsh critic too. But yeah, so that's what I decided to do. But that was a lesson I learned, is that if you spend your life waiting for external validation and that person has a bad day, well, you've no control over that. So I learned that. I applied in all my running. I don't measure myself against the next person running. I don't measure myself against anyone else running. I measure against myself. That's, yeah. And not long after, probably the summer after that, I was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, making my fiberboard boxes, which I've spoken about before. And I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And there was a big machine. And the idea was that we were making beer cartons. That's effectively in Union Camp in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, we made beer cartons. And these beer cartons were sent to companies around the world, mostly within the United States. Pabst Blue Ribbon, La Trobe, various different brewing companies, and some went to Guinness in Cameroon. And that's how I got the job, because my dad knew Bob Quinn. And they were good buddies. And Bob was a great guy. And anyway, we were there, and I was assigned this machine. So I was the blue-collar worker. And the two of us were working this machine. The other guy was a guy called Les. Les, I'm guessing, was probably younger than I am now. But boy, was he gruff. Yeah, gruff old dude. And I was the young guy who did, just, anyway. His job was to load this machine with flat bits of fiberboard, which is like a, long piece of, not corrugated. Corrugated goes up like that, but it's flat layers. A very tough plastic layer on the outside covering the, like a clear coat, covering the patterns of the box. And the idea was that all these sheets went into the machine pressed down on it, and it formed the cutouts so that when you stripped away the cutouts, you had something you could fold into a box and then staple into a beer carton. And so he would be loading this machine with these things, and it'd be going through. My job was a difficult job. At the other end, they'd come out, and then I had to strip away all the excess cardboard that wasn't required so that these things could then be put on a skid or pallet and taken off. And so that was my job. And I had to, and they'd come out and they wouldn't, and then I had to carry them to another machine that had two little hydraulic things that pressed down. And the prongs then were supposed to go down and go through. So say there was little holes where you put your hands, being over like a running track. It'd push down, they'd all go out through the bottom. That was the idea, and you stack them. But of course, in the process, some of them get twisted, and this thing be hopping up and down, and it wouldn't go through, and you'd have to shuffle through and take them out. And it was quite a physical job. So you're doing all this, and then you're turning around to load the skid, and then by the time I then turn around, there'd be another batch piled high. And you worked 2 hours and then 10 minutes off, and you did that, I think, 3 or 4 times. That was the kind of way it worked for your 8-hour shift. And so you did that, and you were sweating buckets. I can be very naive. It took me about 3 weeks to realize that Les, the curmudgeonly, anyway, he had a little dial on his end of the machine, and his dial was sped up just to match me. And so it took me 3 weeks to realize that he was ramping it up. I was going like a... And I learned that people will they'll shove it at you. And you have a capacity to do it. And you have to work within that capacity. And sometimes there's a guy at the other end just firing it at you. And again, you have to take and make your own pace. And that lesson, I always think back. It makes me laugh all the time at my naivety, my stupidity, how I didn't realize. But yeah, it was a valuable lesson in life that you've got to go at a pace that you can sustain and sustain well. I was lucky enough, the next summer I worked in an architect's office as an intern, and Sean wrote me this reference that said I was fast, I was accurate, I was thorough, and I was reliable. I've never forgotten that either. And yeah, but if you want to be fast, accurate, thorough, and reliable, you've got to go at a pace that you can go at. That's the thing. And you've got to set what that is. And that's exactly the same when I'm running a marathon. I go at my pace, not someone else's pace, one that I know I can sustain. Now, sometimes that's a really slow pace, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you go all out because the goal is to qualify for Boston, or the goal is to finish the Ishcraft Polar Night Marathon. They're the goals, and you work the pace accordingly. But yeah, I learned valuable lessons of all of those people and all of those situations, and lessons I apply every day. And I am extremely grateful. I've had the time of my life here in Tromsø at the night marathon. I hope to get the review out in a couple of days. But yeah, I've had such a great time. But I'm so thankful to all of the people who helped along the way with suggestions, with advice, with encouragement. I think I took all of the advice. I certainly protected the package. Thanks, Troy. I certainly did that. And yeah, thanks very much to Chris Bailey for originally suggesting that we run the Midnight Sun Marathon. And I couldn't have done this one without Chris. So yeah, thanks to everybody, and yeah, see you after Tokyo.